This is version 1 of Prosper Sustainably's ETEP training video on employee time and PivotTable reports. An ETEP Strategic Work Plan is a Tribal Environmental Plan, or TEP. An ETEP Strategic Work Plan, or TEP, is a major component of an EPA-Tribal Environmental Plan, or ETEP. However, keep in mind that a full ETEP will include other components which can be further explained by your GAP grant project officer. During this training, I will cover how to add and manage employee time within an ETEP strategic work plan, including through the use of PivotTable reports. For an ETEP strategic work plan, or within an ETEP strategic work plan designed by Prosper Sustainably. So here we are on the main body of an ETEP strategic work plan, and we are now focused on adding and keeping track of and managing employee time and responsibilities for the objectives. So I've scrolled down to the third table that focuses on the objectives, which is the main body, the main management tool. And so as you'll see, for each objective for the year 2016, I've actually added employee time, and so I'm actually going to filter out all the years. Just do 2016 for this sample ETEP strategic work plan. And if we scroll over to the right, continue to scroll, and starting on column O, let me just scroll over just a little bit more. Starting in column O, you'll see primary staff responsibility. And then following that, in columns P through T, there's actually an estimate of the number of work years that each staff member within this fictional tribal environmental program will be dedicating to each of these responsibilities. So one thing I want to add at the very beginning, or note at the very beginning, is that these are just fictional numbers. They're not, these numbers shouldn't necessarily be used when doing your own planning for doing these activities. I just wanted to use these for the purposes, I wanted to enter some information for the purposes of doing this fictional work plan. And so the left column, O, is a primary staff responsibility, and I did the shorthand version, or the abbreviation of each title. So ED is going to be Environmental Director, which is P. AQS is going to be Air Quality Specialist. WQS is going to be Water Quality Specialist. ET is Environmental Technician, and AA is Administrative Assistant. And these are similar to some of the positions you'll find in a tribal environmental program. So the very first one, and as you can see, this is already filled out, so I'm not actually going to go through it because I think it's fairly obvious. I'll provide an example, but so I would go by every example, and one way to do this a little easier. So right now, I can't see the objectives, and the objectives are very far to the left. So it would be challenging to it'd be frustrating actually to have to go back and forth, say, okay, whose responsibility this is, and then scroll back over this way. It's probably making you dizzy watching it. So one thing that you can do to make it easier to see them right next to each other is, so as we said, it was really starting on line O. So really, like, the only things we're very concerned about seeing are maybe, the year and the objective itself. We don't really need to see the capacity indicator or the role. Seeing the area may be helpful because the area is relevant to different positions. So an air quality specialist is more likely to be doing stuff under the uh, air priority program area. So I'm going to, if you click on the very top, it'll highlight the entire column, and if you hold Shift and then left click again on D, you'll highlight both, and then if you right click on these, you can scroll down to hide, and that'll hide those columns so they're no longer visible. Okay, so we've eliminated those ones. We're going to keep this row right, or this column E right here, because we want to be able to see the area. And now we're going to hide the remaining ones as well up until the primary staff responsibility. So I clicked on that one. I go over. So this is the first part we want to see. So we want to hide all the way through N. So I'm going to hold Shift, left click the top of here, and then right click, go down to hide. So those are hidden now. All right. So another thing too is, it's you still can see, like, you can only see part of it, and you may want to be able to see more. So you can go up here in between columns B and E now, and wait till you get this line with the two arrows on both sides, and then let's shrink this down some so we can see more of this. You're not going to be able to see all of it. You might have to scroll back and forth a little bit. I think in trying to see these, you're really looking, oops, so I accidentally, you got to be careful when you're sliding things back and forth. You may accidentally unhide a particular column. So I'm going to make it a little larger because I do want to see the detail of what's in there. As you can see, as I shrunk it's kind of hidden some of the information. Some of them, I guess I do see the whole one here. Okay, so at minimum, I can see the primary staff responsibility next to the objective. So I would go through this line by line, and for each objective, I would identify who's the point person. That's going to be the primary staff responsibility. So these air responsibilities, I've decided in this fictional work plan, are all going to be the air quality specialist, who's has the primary responsibility over these objectives. The next category of areas, and these are actually these have been sorted alphabetically, so you'll see each program area is going to be grouped together in alphabetical order. So climate, typically, in this case, it's a separate priority program area. Climate may sometimes fall under the air priority program area, but in this fictional department, the air quality specialist is going to be responsible for the climate change related objectives as well. But not necessarily all of them. So as you can see, the very last one, or this one under climate change, the submission of reports, we're going to say that the environmental director has the primary responsibility for preparing reports. That may or may not make sense. In fact, now thinking about it, I've allocated more time for the air quality specialist toward this. So I'm going to say the air quality specialist actually has the primary responsibility. All right, so now the next area is education outreach, and this is where you're seeing some differences. So the environmental director actually seems to have a lot of the primary responsibilities, or the point person, a lot of the education outreach related initiatives. So this is recruiting, piloting, establishing a tribal environmental committee, an advisory committee. So that'd be something the environmental director would do. Developing and implementing a procedure for community members to notify the environmental department of environmental concerns. So in this case, we're going to say that the administrative assistant is actually going to take the lead on that. But it just means that in each of these cases, it just means that this is the primary responsibility. This is the person who is going to be kind of managing that particular objective. It's not necessarily the only person that's going to be working on that objective. So in the case of row 46, where the administrative assistant has the primary responsibility, the environmental director still has 0.038 work years, and then even the other positions are involved in this as well to a certain extent, and it's just that the administrative assistant has the most work years on this particular task. And that might be a good rule of thumb. Whoever's working on a particular objective the most, it could be the person that has the primary responsibility. That may or may not be the case, but this is when you're having a meeting about a particular objective, or let's say you're meeting with your administrative assistant, a good thing to do would be to actually filter out all the other ones, all the other staff responsibilities, and just show the administrative assistant ones, so that you can just speak with the administrative assistant about their responsibilities. In this case, that may not be the best way to approach it because they actually only have one primary responsibility. So let's say if we go to the air quality specialist and just look at theirs, you could have a meeting about like where are we in each of these objectives. You have the primary responsibility. What is the status? relative to when the due date is, and so you can keep track of where things are going. Okay, so these filters that I'm applying are shown in a separate training video, so I'm not explaining them right now. But these down arrows allow you to filter uh, the particular staff responsibilities. So you would go through each objective and you would assign a primary staff responsibility. You may choose to do that first as you're going through each objective. I think it might be better actually go through each objective at a time and not only add the primary staff responsibility, but add the estimated work years. So in this case, this is conduct air quality data review analysis and submission to AQS and Tribe. So this is a more the management of air monitoring data. And so in this case, so in estimating the number of work years, how I like to approach this is by actually dividing the a full work year in hours by the number of work years that I've estimated for this particular objective. So for example, well, a full work year, and you see this thing keeps trying to pop up, a full work year is 2,080 hours. That is 52 weeks, so there's 52 weeks in a work year, and there's 40 hours in a work week. So 52 times 40 is 2080. It's pretty standard calculation for work years. So how I like to get these percentages is I like to estimate the number of hours in a given year and then divide that into 2080. So in this case, you'll see the calculation up here. So for doing this data, for doing, in this case, the air quality data review analysis and submission, I'm estimating that's going to take, that's going to be done 4 times per year, so once per quarter, and it's going to take, let's say, 16 hours per quarter for the air quality specialist to do. So I take that and, just to make it a little more clear, so that's the 4 quarters times 16 hours per quarter over 2,080 hours. And so the result of that is 0.031 work years. I put this out to 3 decimal points because if, let's say, it was just 8 hours, it would just show as 0.00. And so I just want to be able to see, 'cause sometimes, there may be somebody who's only spending 8 hours on something for a particular project, and you want to keep track of that. So in this case, there's also the administrative assistant is going to be spending 8 hours per quarter in, with the multiplication division, you don't necessarily need to put these parentheses in, but up in this formula bar. But so 8 hours times once per quarter over 2080, and that is going to be 0.015 work years for the administrative assistant. And so some of them, I did a little calculation. Some of them I just estimated the exact amount of hours. So for an indoor air quality assessment report and developing an indoor air quality management plan, this is something that these air quality specialists is going to spend several weeks on, and maybe this would even be an underestimate. So we're going to say that it's going to take, the air quality specialist is expected to take 200 hours in a work year. So in the formula bar, you can see 200 hours per work year, 2,080 hours, and that's how we get 0.096. That may be too low. I would advise when calculating these that you overestimate, because I think things tend to take longer. It may be worth going through the first time, putting in how long you think things are going to take, and then going back and doubling it. Because things really do take longer than you expect, and over time, as you check these and you kind of keep track of that time, and you compare them with the original estimates, you can refine those estimates to be a bit more accurate. But so that's just kind of a note, and then we're going to say that the environmental director is also going to spend some time on conducting this assessment, preparing the report, and the indoor air quality management plan. And in this case, we're saying that the environmental director is going to be spending about 80 hours on this. And that could be high, that could be low, but 80 hours, essentially 2 full weeks over the course of the year on this particular objective. So, even in this case, I'd say maybe the 200 hours might be a little low for all this, so with the air quality specialist. So let's change it right now. Um, we're going to say, you know what, we really think it's going to take 320 hours uh, over the course of the work year. And we'll leave the environmental director the same. That's what they were before. And so you'll essentially do this for every single one. So you could choose to enter the work years first and then add the primary staff responsibility later on. And then as you have these in, then as I said before, you can filter these things out. If you want to see, if you want to filter out just by primary staff responsibility, I already showed that. You click on this little filter button right here. You unselect all. Let's say we just want to see what the water quality specialist has the primary responsibility for, and you can just, focus on that. Um, and But at the same time, the primary responsibility does not correspond with everything the water quality specialist is working on. So, let's go back and unapply that filter. And if we wanted to have a meeting with the water quality specialist about everything that they're involved in, then we can go to this filter right here. And the way I've approached this is I don't enter 0. I just leave them blank. You could enter 0 as well. But let's say you just want to look at all the objectives in 2016. So 2016 has already been filtered, or we've been filtered everything else out aside from 2016. Let's say you want to just talk to the water quality specialist about everything they're working on. So the things they have primary staff responsibility and things they don't have primary staff responsibility for. So if you click on the down arrow for the water quality specialist, you'll see a series of numbers, and these numbers are just all of the amount of work years they have per area. So in this case, I'm just going to unselect blanks. So if I unselect blanks, that means where there's a blank, then that's now going to be filtered out. And so all the objectives where the water quality specialist does not have any work years are going to be filtered out. If you did enter 0, then instead of unclicking blank, you would just unclick 0, and then you click OK. And now we have just the water quality specialists, the ones they're involved in. So some of them, the water quality specialist has primary responsibility around. Some of them, the water quality specialist is involved in a support role. So, I can meet with my water quality specialist and talk about, okay, these are the things you're going to be working on. These are the things we've agreed that you're working on this year. And so, we can have a conversation around this. All right, so that's how you'd fill this out, and that's how you can use it as a management tool. I think that it's important to work with your staff and perhaps even have your staff members put in their estimates. I think as a director, you actually might be able to, as a director or manager or, program manager, you may be able to enter these all yourself and then just check with your staff members, go over them line by line. They may see it as taking less time or more time. And then I think for performance management, you come back and if you are tracking the amount of time it is taking, you can compare it with your estimates, and that'll help you, as I said, make better predictions in the future. Okay, so this is important to do all at once because then you can actually see how much time. So let's go back and unapply the filter to the water quality specialist. So let's select all, make sure everything's back to where we want. We're still only 2016. My recommendation is don't necessarily fill this out for the entire work plan. Only fill it out for the upcoming year. So if you just crafted your ETEP, you're going to want to fill it out for 2016. My recommendation would be that you fill it out for 2017 when you were developing your GAP work plan for fiscal year 16-17. So that's going to be coming up November, roughly November, December 2015 is when you're going to be developing your work plan for the fiscal year of 2016 to 2017. So I think that that's a good time because you're going to be having to estimate the work years associated with these responsibilities anyways around that time, and you do it all at once. And then if you enter all this information for the full year, you can look at all of it at once and see whether you have under-resourced or over-resourced any particular staff member. So there's two ways to do this. I'm going to show you the um, not necessarily the easier way to do it, but I'm going to show you a way to do it, kind of the quick and dirty workaround way to do it. Well, let me show you the pivot tables way first. So there's a powerful function in Excel called pivot tables, and it has filtering and calculation capabilities. And as you can see on these tabs down at the bottom, I have one called pivot table reports. So I've already created a pivot table that has just included the data of the estimated work years, and I'll show you the pivot table and then we'll go back and recreate it so you can see how it was made. So I'm going to click over here, and as you can see, let me just put this out a little bit. I have filtered it out for the year 2016 this pivot table has the data for the estimated work years for each staff member in the year of 2016, and it has the sum of each one. So right here you can see that the environmental technician in 2016 is expected to work 1.12 work years according to the initial estimates. The administrative assistant is 0.72. The environment director is 1.22. The air quality specialist is 0.78, and the water quality specialist is 1.04. So this pivot table was created before before I started messing with those numbers. So each time if you create a pivot table, you need to refresh the pivot table so that it recalculates the data. So if you're on the pivot table and you right click and you go to refresh, so the numbers have actually changed because, as you recall, I ended up increasing the number of hours that the air quality specialist is going to spend on the indoor air quality assessment report and management plan. So I need to refresh that to get the latest number. So right now it says 0.78. I'm going to refresh this, and now it's 0.83. So there's some more time that the air quality specialist is working on that. So as I said, this is the sum total, and there may be some issues here. So this is why this is a management tool that can help you really kind of identify and manage the objectives. So as of right now, you can see that perhaps the environmental technician, if they're not planning on working overtime, and if you consider that there's probably going to be vacation time and holidays, that the environmental technician, if those estimates are accurate, may not be able to accomplish all the objectives that have been assigned to him or her. Same thing possibly with the environmental director. The air quality specialist may actually not have enough work, so maybe we can shift some of these responsibilities from the environmental director and the environmental technician to the air quality specialist. And for the purposes of this particular scenario, let's say that the 0.72 for the air quality specialist would be okay if that was only the environmental department's administrative assistant. But let's say the administrative assistant actually only works half time for the environmental department and half time for maybe the cultural department. That may be an issue right there. You have actually over-resourced your administrative assistant. You have given them too much work, and you're going to need to either redistribute the responsibilities or shift some of those responsibilities to a future year. And then, water quality specialist, that could be spot on. So you look at this, and then you go back, and you're like, okay, well, you look at each objective, and you see an administrative assistant was involved in doing this year, so developing this procedure. This may not be exactly how you do it, but let's say, okay, well, the air quality specialist we see is under-resourced, and we're going to say that the administrative assistant is going to be involved in this, but they're not going to have the primary responsibility. So because they are going to be involved in helping to communicate and notify the staff members. So they're actually going to, let's say they're going to do this more as a support role. So they're going to spend 40 hours on this. And for the sake of just this example, let's say that now we want the air quality specialist to have the primary responsibility for this particular objective. So we make that adjustment. We can go back to our pivot table report, and remember we have to refresh it. So right now we have 0.72 for the administrative assistant and a 0.83 for the air quality specialist. Let's right click on the table, click refresh, and as you can see, the numbers adjusted, and now you have 0.88 for the air quality specialist and 0.68 for the administrative assistant. And you keep going back and forth with those things. So one strategy is to redistribute the hours. Another strategy would be to change the year. So let's say, you know what, we can't afford to do this in this year. In terms of staffing, we just don't have the staff members to be able to do it. This is line 46. So we're going to say, you know what, we're going to shift this to 2017. The good thing about doing this and when you're doing your gap work plan is you can have you do it while you're developing your gap work plan. So, let's say this already was in 2017. We would consider in the context of all the other responsibilities and assignments in 2017 to decide whether we need to move that to maybe 2018. Okay, so here's how you create a pivot table report. We're going to delete this one right now. And pivot table reports are under Insert. And this is Microsoft Excel 2013, so other versions may not have the same exact instructions, but all of them do have pivot table functionality. At least as far as I know, they do. I know at least going back to pre-2000, it would have it. So we want to insert a pivot table. So we go to Insert, and we go to Pivot Table, and then we have to select a table or a data range. So there's two ways to do this. So right now we make sure we're in this box, and we have to go back and click here. And let's kind of put this aside right now. And so one way to do this is you select the entire range of this table. So you click here, and then you go to the bottom corner of the table. So you have the upper left hand portion of it. You click at the bottom one. You hold Shift. Let's get this out of the way. You hold Shift, and then you have the entire data there. So that would prepare the pivot table. This has the data embedded within it. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it. So let's delete that pivot table. Let's see. Let's undo that pivot table. Another way to do it, so let's go insert pivot table again, is you actually can name your tables. So if you go back here, and let's click on the table itself. If you're within the table itself, and let's go to data. So let's cancel out of this. Let me just show you something real quick. So if you go here, if you want to name or see the name of your table, click on the table itself. You'll see up top table tools. Menu option will pop up. Click on design. And then all the way over here to the left of this ribbon is a table name. And by default, it usually says table name 1, table name 2, table name 3. In this case, I've named the table as objectives. So now when I can actually put that table name in something that asks me for, and it'll automatically select all the contents of the table. So if I go back and go to create a pivot table, insert pivot table, and then in this field I type objectives, the same exact data is entered, and it's quicker than highlighting the entire pivot table. Okay, so with this pivot table, we wanted to calculate the sum of the work years for each staff member in the year 2016, so we can identify whether we need to assign more responsibilities to each staff member or assign less, and possibly shift some of the objectives to a later year. So first thing we're going to do is filter out for year 2016. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to left click and hold on it, and I'm going to drag it into filters. So this tells the pivot table that I'm just adding a certain filter. So as you can see, the pivot table now is a very small pivot table right here. It just has this is the only data that's currently in it. So with the year filter applied right now, the filter itself has not been applied. It's actually showing all years. So we want to click this down arrow, and then we want to go click select multiple items, And then right now it's still showing all. We want to unclick all and then just go 2016. So we just show 2016. Okay, so now we want to see the data we want to look at is the estimated work years for each staff member. So we have our ED. So here in this pivot table field is where you select these things. So we have ED estimated work years. Let's click that. And ignore the table to the left right now. We got to shift the data around. We're going to click Air Quality Specialist for estimated work years, Water Quality Specialist, Environmental Technician, and Administrative Assistant. So now we have all the data in the table, but this doesn't really look right. So we need to do a little more manipulation of this data to show it the way that we want to show it. So when we clicked on it, by default, it put it into the rows. And now we want to take these guys. So this is the pivot table fields right here. And we want to take these and we actually want to shift them to values. So each of the estimated work years we want to shift over here. So environmental director, water quality specialist, environmental technician, and administrative assistant. So and this actually has what we want. The problem is the default calculation is for count instead of value. So right now it's showing the number of instances that something shows up with under. So if we go back to the pivot table itself, under this particular column, what's happening right now is it's showing the count of how many times in the table for the year 2016 that a value is showing up. So for each time it sees one of these, it's giving a value of 1. That's not what we want. We want the summation. We want to sum up the estimated work years. Okay, so we're going to have to go to each one, and there's a down arrow, or actually another way is right here. Let's go on this. Actually, let's go right here, and let's right-click. And then we're going to go summarize values by, and it shows count. We want to go to sum. So right now we can see that it's on the sum. So we have 1.215, so on and so forth, work years for the environmental director. That's the sum of all the work years of the environmental director for 2016. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is actually to go over here, and it can be difficult to see. A little thing does pop up when you do this. So we have ED already. So we pull the down arrow right here. This is count of administrative assistant estimated work years. This way is you go to value settings, and then you go to change it from count to sum. The quickest way really though is to just right click on it. Right click, go to summarize values by sum. Let's do this for all of them. Summarize values by sum. Summarize values by sum. Okay, so now we have the right data, but I don't really like the way it shows right now. It's very difficult. I don't want to have to scroll over. So one way to change that is right now the values themselves are being displayed by column. I want them to be displayed by row. So right here you can see the values display is in the columns field. We can drag that, click and drag that to the rows column. And so now it's a lot cleaner. And it just shows them, in rows. You can see it's all very simple box right now. One thing I also don't like is that the values themselves they're showing too many decimal points. So I'm going to highlight all of them, and then I'm going to go up here. We're under Home, and we go to Number, and we can click Decrease Decimal Points. Another way would be to right-click on it and go Number Format. And then you could go 2 decimal points as well and just click OK. So that actually does it for just one of them, which I want to do it for all of them. Let's undo that. Let's highlight all of them. We're going to go up here to decrease decimals, and we're going to go down to just 2 100ths. Okay, so this is how you prepare the pivot table. And now when you go back here and you see, okay, well, our environmental technician has too much time being spent, then we need to make a change here. So if we make adjustments, we want to make adjustments, we can go back here to this table, and let's say we just with the environmental technician, I know when I created this that I gave a lot of their time to operating the tribal transfer station. So it's open, let's say, uh, as of right now, it's supposed to be open 3 days a week. So we have our environmental technician who's running the transfer station for 3 days a week, times 52 weeks per year. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to allow for vacations, but we'll get some subs in there. Well, let's say that this is, too much. We need to just, because our environmental technician right now, according to the calculation, is a little bit over-resourced, we need to get them down some. So we need to get that down to maybe 2.5 days, or let's just try 2 days. So now he's down at 0.4. From 0.2, we come back here, we got to right click and refresh. So now we have 0.92. So maybe there's a happy medium. Maybe instead of maybe 2 days, let's say it's 2.5 days. So instead of 16 hours, there's 20 hours that's operational. So now it's 0.5. We go back here, we right click, refresh, and we now 1.02. So that may be the optimal balance. So that just shows you how this can be utilized as a management tool for your staffing needs. So another way to do this, it's not as clean. I don't like it as much. I think it's better to use pivot tables. But let's say this whole pivot table thing just seems a little too daunting. Hopefully I've made it clear enough. But you can actually go back here, and you could select the fields themselves and just sum them. So in this case, we can just select all the fields and just go equals sum, and then we select from this entire field right here. So now it's going to do the sum of each of those. So it's just running calculations, doing what the pivot table is doing anyways, and it's doing 1.25. So we go back here, 215, and it's the same number, just rounded up as over here. And then we could actually drag this formula over so it repeats it for each position. And as you can see, like the report itself matches these numbers. If they were rounded down one more, they would be exact. So 1.22 down to 0.68, and then 0.68122. So they're all the same. The only problem with this method is if you have, like we just dragged down the entire field right now, but we only have data for 2016. If we had data for 2017, then it would have included the 2017 data in there as well. So let's just do one example to show you that. So let's go and let's unapply this filter right here. Let's show all years. And let's just add a test example. Let's just say 2019 test objective test. So it doesn't really matter. We're just going to say, okay, so we're just going to add one full work year for the environmental director. So it's not adding that in quite yet. 0.33, 2.68. So right now they're actually technically in order, but if you'd be dragging down possibly through the entire table. So this should be the sum of the full thing, and I don't believe that if you filter these out. So, the possibilities is that this could be a 2016 activity that we need to account for as well, so that you need to take the sum of the entire thing. So let's try filtering this out again for 2016. And let's do the sum of all 2016 activities now. So as you can see, that this activity that was a possible activity before is now included in its row number 95. So before, our selection only went through line 68. So now if we capture this to capture all of them, so this would be of what's showing. So sum of this bottom one through the top one here. Oops, too many parentheses. Then unfortunately we're capturing that one activity, even though it's not showing up in the filter, we're still capturing that one additional test work year. And so that's the only drawback, is you have to be very careful. If you're just gonna calculate the sum of them, you just have to realize that if you drag down your full selection, it won't be as quick. You can do it, but as you make changes to your table, as you add new objectives, then you would have to go back and very carefully make sure that each summation had that. The pivot tables allow you to automatically incorporate those adjustments in there. So let's say go back to the pivot table and we go to refresh, and it has not captured any data that's outside of the year 2016. So those are two different ways. So this is the how to add and manage employee time and responsibilities in a pivot table, and how to run in the ETEP Strategic Work Plan, and how to run pivot table reports to very quickly manage and change that data as needed. So that is the end of this training video.